We are delighted that you are joining in the Vital Conversations movement, dealing with issues related to faith, culture, and fighting oppression in the church and world today. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Joseph Sampson. Dr. Sampson is the director of Reconciliation Trainers Africa, an organization that provides community training and resources in conflict mediation, leadership, and human rights education. He has written extensively on the subject of peace building, specifically as it relates to interethnic and interreligious conflict. His passion for bringing communities together has been recognized throughout Nigeria and on the continent of Africa. We invite you to stay connected with GCOR by following us on Facebook and Twitter, and by visiting our website to learn more about our work and to find resources to assist you in having your own vital conversations. And now, it is my very distinct pleasure to present to you Dr. Joseph Sampson.
I am Reverend Joseph Marine Sampson. The current state of Muslim-Christian relations in Nigeria has deteriorated over the years, and years of mistrust, violence, and conflict have destroyed relationships that have once existed between these two major faiths in Nigeria. Muslim and Christian relations in Nigeria are in serious need of sustained dialogue to bridge religious and communal differences in a period of heightened political violence and rising cases of extremism. We now have all-inclusive Muslim and Christian communities springing up in most cities of northern Nigeria. The state of Muslim-Christian relations in Nigeria is contentious, but the church can have a role in bringing about peace and proffering ways in which it can get involved. Islam in Nigeria is predominantly in the north, with a small number of followers in other parts of the country. It has been estimated by the Pew Research Center that Muslims comprise slightly more than half of the population. There are notably two major Islamic sects in Nigeria, which are the Shia and the Sunni groups. While the two sects are similar in many ways, they differ over conceptions of religious authority and interpretation, as well as the role of the Prophet Muhammad's descendants. Muslims in Nigeria have to deal with many problems concerning the violent conflict in northern Nigeria. They have to address questions about perception of their religion and how they left the door open to violence and extremists. They have to deal with the level of honesty about their relations with Christians or non-Muslims beyond the moral question. Why is this violence only in northern Nigeria? And Muslims in the southwest region have not behaved like their northern counterparts. Northern Muslims must answer why this ugliness is peculiar to the region and their vision of Islam. There has been too much hypocrisy in northern Islam based on how the elite have used the religion to deceive, belittle even their own people. Some of their leaders have thrived in pretending to place Islam over and above their nation, not to mention other minorities within their enclaves. When you deny Christians the chance to go on pilgrimages, when you build hundreds of mosques and deny Christians land, when you deny non-Muslims places in the bureaucracy or in public life, what are you saying to your children? When you privilege one group and make the other feel inferior, you are opening the window of hatred, and the young people growing up can see the difference between Cain and Abel. Christianity is another major religious entity in Nigeria, whose followers also make up about half of the population. The notable Christian religious groups in Nigeria are the Catholics, the Protestants, and the Orthodox, and others such as the Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses, which are geographically widespread within the country, but notably in the south and western parts. Christians in Nigeria are diverse theologically as well as geographically, but share basic faith tenets concerning God, Son, and the Holy Spirit. The prevailing explanations for the rise of religious extremism and subsequent terrorism in Nigeria have until now focused on the United States foreign policy. This is particularly evident in Africa and the Middle East, which describe social inequalities, poverty, the writings and teachings of Abdul al-Mawdud and Sayyid Qutb, which have spanned radical Islamist groups. These were remote factors behind the 1979 Iranian Revolution that further set off Islamic extremist movements in various parts of the Muslim world, including northern Nigeria. Granted, these factors are helpful in explaining the rise of religious extremism and terrorism in Nigeria. They, however, have not adequately accounted for variations in outcomes that we observe in practice. Explanations based on poverty or social economic inequalities also fail to explain why most terrorists belong to the upper middle class or the middle class in the society, and why other third world countries, which have high poverty rates, have not witnessed increase in religious extremism and terrorism. Also, religion or subjective interpretations of religious thought arguments have clearly not answered whether religion is being used by terrorists as a tool for political or nationalistic goals. I would like to present a practical account on the upsurge of violence, extremism, and terrorism against the church in Nigeria. This is from the perspective of historical antecedents and radicalized statements made by prominent Muslim followers as a basis for the violence being witnessed by the church. The central argument is that fear by the two major religious majorities in Nigeria is a major factor that has led to the upsurge of religious extremism and terrorism. A common trait that waves violent political movements together is fear. This is the case of violent religious movements we have noticed in Nigeria since independence. The fear of being deprived of something drives one to act aggressively, while the fear of being left out drives movements against prevailing forces. Immediately after our nation's declaration of independence in 1960, the foremost Muslim leader, Sir Ahmadu Bello, called for Nigeria to become an estate of our great-grandfather, Usman Dan Fodio. We must ruthlessly prevent a change of power. We use the minorities in the north as willing tools and the south as a conquered territory, and never allow them to rule over us, and never allow them to have control over their future. This call to action led to deadly action against Christians in the 1960s and became for many the worst example of Islamic extremism marked as a struggle for African self-determination. In fact, Muslim extremists interpreted Bello's words to mean that the newly independent Nigeria should become a theocracy based on the tenets of Islam, because Allah is the only sovereign one, so that any Nigerian who is not a Muslim is flouting spiritual and civil law, and that any form of government not based on Islam is evil and should be supplanted. There are several factors causing unrest between Muslims and Christians in Nigeria. The closeness and distance at the same time characterize the inner relationship between the Christian and Islamic faith. There are historical differences and misinterpretations that are aided by colonial histories is another factor. The politicization of religious issues in Nigeria since independence is another factor. So also regional, ethnic, and religious tensions have marred the country. Though Christians and Muslims form the bulk of the population of the country, they have not been able to overcome the political manipulations of politicians. Another factor which has caused unrest between Christians and Muslims is ignorance. Most adherents of these two religions know little or nothing about each other's faith. And finally, the failure and inability of Muslim majority states in Nigeria to provide adequate state protection for its Christian minorities has left a vacuum open for extremism, hence the atrocities meted against the church. Now, here are some suggestions for how the church should respond to Islamic hostility in Nigeria. The church can create a space for educational opportunities on interfaith issues and elementary, basic, and tertiary levels of education in schools owned by the church. This would be a means to raise a godly generation of people who would be able to exercise the Christian faith in the world to which we have been asked to serve as the light. The church should forge synergies with non-governmental organizations or community-based development agencies whose role and activities involve interfaith and reconciliation initiatives to serve as a support base for enlightenment. The church should consider introducing interfaith courses in Bible colleges and seminaries as a window of opportunity to engage the clergy and build their capacity level in active and improved relationships with Muslims. The church should be a reconciling church, as noted by John Paul Lederite of the University of Notre Dame, who says reconciliation is a meeting ground where trust and mercy have met and where justice and peace have kissed. Such reconciliation efforts by the church will take time to be achieved, but churches must at least take the initial steps to sow seeds of peace through reconciliation. And finally, there is a need for the church in Nigeria to realize that it is better to speak with rather than about the other. The church should be in the forefront in organizing interfaith forums and community-led initiatives to support religious and cross-cultural dialogue. So, is there hope? And if so, where is it? Nigeria today faces enormous challenges in the area of maintaining peace and accelerating development. In my opinion, and from experience drawn from a decade of peace work amongst Christians and Muslims in Nigeria, all religious adherents must embrace interreligious dialogue. This calls for religious nurturing, faith, trust, dialogue, communication, reconciliation, and mutual understanding of one another, thus guaranteeing communal good for the church and the nation. I want to conclude by emphasizing that it is imperative that Muslims and Christians look to their respective sources for guidance and inspiration to advance interfaith relations. This, I think, will certainly provide the building blocks for just and peaceful relations between Muslims and Christians in Nigeria, and with all of humanity as a whole. Greater awareness of socio-political issues, together with a more nuanced and robust theological exchange based on commonalities rather than differences, will go a long way in forging strong ties between faith-based communities resolute in protecting vulnerable groups from gross atrocities. Thank you.